So today I want to address some viewer comments. There's seven comments or seven groups of comments that I want to speak to. The first is I spent a lot of time talking about people like Jackson Hinkle or the editor of RT or Colonel McGregor or Scott Ritter, Tucker, those kind of people. And when I do, people always say things like, well, they're just getting money from the Kremlin. They don't really believe this stuff. They're grifters. I'm not so sure, and I've been thinking about this for a long time, but Vlad Vexler just recently gave me, I think, the key that'll help me understand this. I'm going to be talking about this in an entire video next week, but it helps me have a framework for whether they do really believe that or don't. I will say that I believe that Scott Ritter really does believe it, and he's just a Russophile and just loves everything Russian and can't see past that. But for the rest of the analysis, you're going to have to wait till next week. But I've been trying to let this idea mature in my brain. Okay, the second thing. So yesterday I did this why don't they love us, and I made this comment like, if you just roll back the clock 20 years, I mean 80% of Ukrainians were pro-Russian, and people challenged me left and right about that, and I'm saying, look, no, there's polling that comes from this. No, there's not. You forget about the Holodomor and other things. No, that was bad. The Holodomor was bad, and there was anti-Russian sentiment in the Holodomor rather, that drove Ukrainians to work with Germany to relieve them of the Soviets, right? Just like there was in Lithuania. In fact, I stood in Lithuania in Klaipėda in the square where Hitler spoke to the Lithuanians, and like they went through the same kind of thing. The Soviets were so bad to them that they were looking for relief anywhere that they could get it, not because they were pro-Nazi, but because they were anti-Soviet, and they were just looking for anybody so they could have their freedom. They were going through the same kind of struggle. So yes, that was bad at the time, but then by the time we got to, well, let me just show you the poll. This is the Kyiv Center, okay? I'm not making this up. This is Kyiv International Institute of Sociology, and this is one of their studies, Dynamics of Good Attitude of the Population of Ukraine to Russia and Russia to Ukraine. Look back here. This is April 08, and this was up in the 80% range, 90% range actually, and then we had, well, 2014, and it fell through the floor like a rock, right? Down to about 30%, raised a little bit, and by February of 2020, it was about 40%. So there was a good portion of the population that still had some positive feelings toward Russia. Now, if it depends, all studies depend on how you ask the question. It's almost like asking a computer something. What you ask will get you closer or further from the truth. So here's another one that shows you even more of a reaction. How would you like to see Ukraine's relations with Russia? And your choices are, they should be the same as other states, closed borders, visas, customs, or in orange, Ukraine and Russia should be independent but friendly states with open borders and without visas and customs. That's like the pro-Russia, or they should unite and become one state. Well, unite's always been very small, right? But even then, if you roll back the clock to 08, unite was about 20%. Okay, so that sentiment was there. Now, what happened here? Here is Russia should be independent but friendly, and that was at about almost 70, a little north of 70%, and then 2014 happened, and it dropped like a rock, and then 2022 dropped through the floor. And I've seen some estimates that showed that it was in the single digits. Okay, so that's that. I hope that I've proved out my point here now. Now the next question was parallels between Star Wars and well, that's because yesterday where I was talking about this, I just happened to mention this on Father's Day, this Father's Day thing, and then yesterday I talked about the Star Wars t-shirt that my daughter got me for my birthday. I happen to be wearing another one that I was also given with this was with Baby Yoda. Well, it's, you know, Baby Yoda's name isn't Baby Yoda, but that's popularly what it's called. The Star Wars t-shirt I wore yesterday, this one, I actually posted the link, and somebody told me that they, just for fun, not, I mean, just help, you know, if anybody is interested in it. And the link there, they were out of t-shirts, so I went and I hunted for another link, and it was actually $10 cheaper if you actually want to get a hold of this. It's at Leadership. It's about lifting people up with Darth Vader going, you don't believe in the Force, right? And, go, "Ah!" that kind of thing. Okay, so at any rate, that's where all that came from. But there was a really interesting discussion that followed about how a few people said, this is what's going on in Ukraine is kind of like Star Wars. That's really interesting. So how is it like Star Wars? This huge empire is invading this small group with these rebels that are fighting back against it. Now, I know that in Ukraine it's much more organized than that, but there is an interesting parallel between some of the things, and that would leave Zelensky like Princess Leia, who's left to organize the resistance, and that's not a slam against Zelensky. It's she's just more the main character that fits the bill. And what did she do? And she went and tried to rally political forces and try to get groups together to be able to support them. And yeah, I think there's a lot to that. And when I think about it, I think that there is a really interesting parallel there. Okay, so the next question is what's happening in the counteroffensive? So in the counteroffensive, and I talked about this a little bit the other day, processing the Ukrainian counteroffensive, and I'm going to talk about it some more. And somebody asked me with the counteroffensive, like, okay, so you say that Ukrainians shouldn't be scared, and here's why you should process. That's what I was talking about here as I was talking about processing. What are the Russians experiencing? And so I already sketched out what I'm going to talk about with that, and I'm going to talk about that soon. I also think that more than what's happening in the counteroffensive is how do you know what is true about what's happening? It's the epistemological question about the information that you're given. Like, how do you know? And that is really, really critical, because if you absorb RT's narrative, it's going to be a very different thing than if you drink from a well that is Western free media. Even if it's mainstream media that might have an agenda, it still is going to be a very different, much closer to fact kind of experience than if you're just drinking from Russian state media. Okay, so the next one was Rusplaining, and so I think that's an appropriate term. Rusplaining, the idea that it is, and so here's how I would define it: it is lying or shading or obfuscating or doing something that shifts from truth into a Russian version of the narrative that they want you to understand. I think that's what I'm trying to explain. And some people would say, well, no, you should call it, it's kind of like gaslighting. Well, no, gaslighting is a different thing, but they are gaslighting at the same time. A number of you brought up gaslighting, and that's fair. The Russians do gaslight with this, but I'm trying to get more to the idea like the mansplaining kind of thing. Like, no, you just don't understand. It's like this. But I think it's a good term because it immediately sets them into a position where it shows that it's not reality, it's their version of reality that they're foisting on us. And so I think that's worth pursuing. Okay, the next one, this was such a great quote, and I thought this was, wow, this was... So John and Zingo, and I'm sorry I didn't give credit to other people, but because there's so many of you that said these things repetitively, this was the only one that was not repetitive. A number of you have raised the other points. So John and Zingo said, quote, their God is Russia, and here we were talking about the why don't they love us stuff, and how they could say these like horrible things about Ukrainians, and well, we just need to put them under our boot and that kind of thing. He said their God is Russia. That's what they worship, sacrificing all. And I thought, wow, that's exactly right. That's the way gods work everywhere. Whether it is Christianity, look, as a Christian, I give everything to God, right? I mean, I am His servant, and that's how it works. But even in ancient times, when you're sacrificing to an idol, those, like, let's call them little g gods, these like Molech and Baal and all the other gods of the ancient world, Zeus and whatever, they still demand of you, right? That's what's going on here. Their God is Russia. They demand their fealty, their all, and they will sacrifice everything for the God of Russia. And I think that's actually a really good way of explaining what's going on. Okay, finally, the last one was somebody mentioned because I was talking about, like, I find this really interesting stream with like Ritter and Medhurst and others, Medhurst particularly, who just seems to hate the West, and McGregor. Well, McGregor doesn't actually hate like the West. He more like hates the generals in the United States Army, but Ritter seems to have this like just love for Russia and hatred of the US. And somebody pointed out it's not that they hate America. They're in a weird way trying to fix it. And that led me to, I'm sketching out another video for next week that I think addresses that. It's really interesting. They don't see themselves as the bad guys. And that's all I'm going to say about that. They think they're the good guys. And what would happen if they think that they're the good guys? How do we see them properly? Again, everything I'm doing is trying to provide context and trying to, not see a straw man, but see things through the eyes of the opponent. So, if you ever watched Ender's Game or read the book Ender's Game, it's a science fiction book about this kid who has these extraordinary strategic abilities, and he's fighting these aliens, right? And his explanation of how he could do this was when he came to understand them so much that he actually loved them, he could destroy them. Now, I'm not trying to do that, not trying to actually love the Russians for what they're doing or whatever. It's not that. But I have to understand them so well that I understand them like they understand themselves. Otherwise, I'm not seeing reality as they see it, and I'm going to misunderstand them and not be able to predict or explain what's going on. So that's what I'm trying to do, and that's what I'm trying to help you do, is see them as they see themselves. And that's all I'll say with that for now. All right, so I hope that helps you and gives you some context. Thank you for all the comments. I really appreciate being able to grow with you. You guys are awesome, and your comments help me think and process, and then I can help you all think and process even more, and it becomes a great it is almost like a classroom kind of environment where we can have this talk. It's strangely mediated, but whatever. It's okay. Thank you for likes. Thank you for subscribes and ringing the bell, and for shares. Shares really help me. If you can share any video that you find really compelling on social media, that really helps that video get some traction. Thank you for the coffees. I really appreciate it. A number of you have done that recently, and it warms my heart to know that people actually care about this, because this takes a lot of time. And thank you for all your support in all these ways. But most of all, thank you for being the kind of person that cares about Ukraine. I'll be back tomorrow, and I hope you will be too.